All right, we are back here on the Just End the Suffering podcast. Entering the seventh inning stretch here. We're going to do some fantasy baseball as we get your attention off of March Madness for a minute. Joining me today, one of my favorite fantasy baseball guys, in addition to all of his pop culture coverage here in the podcast, Alan Austin's here. Alan, how are you?
Mike, good to see you this time around doing the podcast. I am well.
Yeah, usually we do it on the phones, unless I get you on Zoom this time.
Yeah, and I'll probably sound a lot clearer. Whenever I listen back to myself on your show, I always sound like I'm like in the Kill Bill grave trying to like bust myself out of it. Like I'm 10 feet underground. So it's nice to be able to probably be heard appropriately.
Yeah, absolutely. And last year we did fantasy baseball. We're going to do it at the start of the season. Then COVID happened, and we did it in July. And how did you do in fantasy baseball last year?
Not well. Admittedly, part of that was my heart just wasn't in it last year.
Yep.
My team was all over the place in terms of, are they healthy? Are they not? Just trying to manage the season was like, it was a crapshoot. I couldn't get into it, and I was out early. I think we were like a month and a half into the season, and I already knew I had no shot. So I was pretty disinterested, to say the least, but I'm all the more interested heading into 2021.
Yeah, for me, like I had a good team on paper, and then it was one of those things where nobody hit for the first like 3 weeks. So I put myself in a big hole. I tried to charge back, just ran out of time, and I'm okay. I'm happy though. I got the first pick of my keeper draft because I won the keeper draft lottery here. So usually we awarded to the consolation bracket winner, the first overall pick. Since there was none this year because I expanded the playoffs to 8 teams in my league to give more opportunity, I won the 1 in 4 lottery to get number 1, which is a big advantage in the keeper league.
That's great. Congratulations.
Yeah, I'll take it. I want to try and win though. I haven't won this league since 17, so I'd like to get back on top of the mountain.
You know, there are people in leagues for 20 years who've never won. So for you to say that you haven't won since 17, that's a winner's mentality right there.
Yeah, I mean, like I run this league. I've been in the top 3 a bunch of times. I have one ring. I want to get another one.
Well, good luck, sir.
Yeah, same to you. And I had to say, getting ready for this season, I thought it would be easier because like, okay, 162 again. Everything is all normal. Then, I like to do it. I like to get my fantasy baseball magazine, like to read the magazine, get some stuff. I'm looking at the numbers here. I'm like, this is so hard because right now your numbers are so skewed because 19 was juice baseball, which means you have guys in 35 home runs who are normally probably in 17, and you had the pitcher pitching normal innings. And then last year, obviously 60 games. So it's so hard to rely on that analysis of like what we saw the last 2 years.
It's almost like we have to kind of start all over again, which is, fitting with fantasy, but there are certain aspects of this season you cannot predict. One is how our pitcher's going to do with the inning workload after only playing 60 games last year and almost going 2 years without a real regular schedule. So it's going to be tough. It's hard to rely on that. Obviously, COVID was still play a part. I think we both know that at a certain point, all these players will be vaccinated and those kind of numbers will certainly go down. So I'm less worried about COVID this season, more worried about wear and tear and sudden impact, so to speak, on the players.
Yeah, it makes some sense because the COVID thing, really, it's going to be an issue, I think, the first half of the year based on the timing of when the vaccine rollout is going to be. So I feel like April and May are going to be our rough months here in terms of like if we're going to have games postponed, if we're going to have guys on the COVID list for contact tracing reasons because they catch the virus. But I think for me, in terms of how I run my league, we basically are going back to our normal 2019 rules where we had the only thing we're doing, we're giving a couple extra IL spots for the COVID guys. But other than that, we're just acting like it's going to be a normal year. That's how the MLB is treating it.
Yeah, our league's doing the same thing. A few more IL spots, a bigger window. So what we did last year, we implemented a COVID list. So if your player got COVID or was in protocol and would miss a chunk of time, you had the right to drop them and pick up a free agent without penalty so that when they were, when they came off, you could just re-pick them up. No one else had rights to them. So it was a thing that we threw in for 2020. We're not doing that this year. This year is kind of going pretty straightforward and it's a roll of the dice. So
it is a roll of the dice. I do think it's going to be nice to have some normality back. I want to touch on one T Brown with the pitchers. I think it's fascinating because most years you have your horses are going like 200, 215 innings. Even your back end guys sometimes go like 170. Nobody lets you pitch more than 80. That's inclusive of the 80, 85, inclusive of the playoffs. So that's a huge innings jump for a lot of these guys to go from that.
It is, especially the younger pitchers who are, the last 10 years or so in the big leagues, you and I have witnessed it, especially coming from the age where we grew up watching baseball, where the pampering, whether you believe in it or not, of pitchers' workload, the pitch counts and all that has already been significantly more monitored. And I can only think that that's going to increase this year. So we may be looking at some pitchers, especially in that prospect near big league level ready, that aren't pitching more than 120 innings this year.
Yeah.
So that you have to take that into consideration when drafting these guys.
Yeah, I think it's something that you have to sort of look at what teams like the Mets and the Dodgers are doing, where they're sort of having 8 quality options for starting pitching. So, like, I feel like the more capable starters you have this year, the better off you're going to be. You can't just take like your ace and then just say, okay, I'll be fine after that. You need to have like enough options because some of your guys are going to land on the IL.
Yeah, when you think about it, when it comes to pitchers and workloads and consistency, we're probably not going to get back to it until 2 seasons from now.
Yeah.
Like around 2023, when everyone's kind of back in the rhythm and pitchers have worked their pitch counts back to a normal big league level. It's going to be a while. This is not that year. So, we'll get into draft strategy a little bit, but we'll get back to this when it comes to pitching when we touch on that.
And we hope it's 2023 because don't forget we have that labor time bomb hanging over us here. So that's one that could throw us back even further.
Always. It's just we need a new commissioner. I've said that on the record on this show before. We need someone who loves baseball but is also a good businessman, and it's just not happening right now with Mr. Manfred.
Yeah, it certainly isn't. And I think also the hitter thing they're also fascinating here because the juice baseball in theory is gone. In theory, we're going to have the normal baseball coming back. So you have to look back at those 19 numbers and say, maybe the guy who hit like 19 home runs and hit 4 in 2020, maybe more of a 10 guy over the whole of a season, close to a 20 guy.
The first guy that jumps to mind is Gleyber Torres, especially in our market. People are going to be drooling to sign him, to select him. And you really got to watch out. I'm not saying he'll be a bust, but I'm also saying he's not going to be 2019 Gleyber Torres. So there's a lot of players like that around the league.
To be fair to Gleyber Torres, though, he still had the same division of the Baltimore Orioles. We homered they got like 17 home runs against that year. So, I mean, he's going to kill him again.
If every game was in Camden Yards, he'd be the MVP and have a better than Bonds season, no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the draft for a minute here. So, like, what's your plan of attack for the draft this year? Like, how are you approaching things? Has it changed at all from COVID?
There's an old expression, jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah.
So I'd rather balance my roster out with guys who are average to above average in as many categories as possible, rather than a guy who will be the best in one. So that's specifically a guy I'm going to personally avoid is an Eloy Jimenez, who is going to mash, but he's not going to be every category. He's not going to get you steals. He's probably not going to be in the upper echelon of runs. I'm going to try to stay away from players like that and look to get a little bit more diversity in terms of statistics and consistency. So that's my plan, both on the pitching and hitting side. Kind of get those middle tier guys who will add up the stats as opposed to 1 or 2 studs in 1 or 2 categories.
Yeah, I think for me, I think the interesting thing to consider there is obviously I like to usually just stack the bats because they're so much more dependable in the early rounds, and then like do that, get one ace, and then sort of like backfill your pitching as you go, and sort of go. At least I like to have like 3 or 4 hitters in there, one pitcher, and that starts sort of alternating hitter, pitcher, the rest of the way.
Of course, yeah. I first of all, if you're doing a regular online draft, I wouldn't draft a stud pitcher until at least round 3, depending on who's available. If you're auctioning, I say, budget appropriately for that ace, but don't overspend for the middle of the road pitchers when you can probably lock up the hitters that you need to first.
Yeah, and I think so too. And in terms of the pitchers, also the aces here, I've seen a lot of debate online between who the top guy is, like whether it's Garrett Cole or it's Jacob deGrom. I've seen some Shane Bieber stands come out of the woodwork after last year. So who is your first pitcher?
I'm always going Jake.
Yeah.
I'm always going Jake deGrom, and it's not a New York bias. I think he is the best pitcher in baseball for the last 3 years. I don't think anything's going to change. And we talked about, you want to avoid guys who aren't going to pitch many innings. He will pitch the required innings. He's one of a handful of guys you can rely on. And when you're the best, that's got to be the number 1 pick. I know, New York Yankee fans will argue Garrett Cole, but I'm still going deGrom as my first pitcher off the board.
Yeah, I agree with that. Not my Met fan bias speaking, as I'm wearing the Met shirt on the Zoom here. I will say also that Jake will give you everything. As of right now, there's no DH in the National League as of recording time, so that's something he's going to advantage. He's facing pitchers still, which means he's going to get some easy outs in those games. And his problem over the years has been he can't get wins because the Mets either can't score for him or the bullpen blows games. So they've improved in both those areas. So I figure he's in line for a big wins correction this year.
Yes. And, not every league runs the win stats, but for those who do quality starts instead of wins, even more the reason to love Jake. So he is the guy, in my opinion. And all the love to Garrett Cole, who I think is probably number 2 right now.
Yeah, Jacob deGrom is one of my 3 keepers in my league this year. So I'm very happy I have a starting point for my offense. My staff.
Yeah, that's a beautiful choice.
Is a great choice. And in terms of, let's say you're lucky and you have the number 1 overall pick in a non-keeper league, because keeper league guys throws things off because guys are getting kept off the board. So if you're sitting there number 1, your standard league, where are you going?
Now, I honestly believe there are 5 players to choose from.
Yeah.
The big 5. I'm going to go with Fernando Tatis Jr. if I have the first pick. The guy was unbelievable last year, and it wasn't one of those false sample sizes. The guy's got the talent. He's got the big contract. The team's going to be good. It's going to be electric down there in San Diego. And if I had to, the only other player that I really considered over him was Juan Soto. So I'm going to go Tatis.
Yeah, those are good. Those are 2 good choices there. I'm going to throw one out there. I think if I was number 1, I'd take Ronald Acuna Jr. because he has that 5 category potential. And I feel like he's got such a good lineup behind him in Atlanta. He's hitting leadoff a lot of the time. He's still going to put up those stats for you. I like Ronald Acuna number 1.
That's a great choice. I have this thing against Ronald Acuna right now, only because of the lack of hustle at times.
Yeah.
So I just obviously I'm alone on that island where I just can't shake that thought. He's uber talented. You will not regret picking him if you're able to get him in this draft, even if it's at number 1. I honestly agree with you, so I have no problem with that.
Yeah, let's get to some of the stuff that people really care here. Let's talk about some sleepers. Let's go to the offense first. Who are your sleeper hitters?
My first sleeper hitter is Rumpelstiltskin, famous for sleeping. Or is it Rumpelstiltskin who sleeps? Who's the fairy tale that sleeps?
I trying to think which one it was. I think it's Ichabod Crane.
No, he's the headless horseman. He's Rumpelstiltskin. Bad jokes aside, my first sleeper hitter is somebody who is considered an upper echelon prospect, but had a pretty miserable 2020 debut. But I love the peripherals, and I'm going with the Cardinals outfielder Dylan Carlson.
Yeah, why Dylan?
I just love what he's, I love his skill set. I think he kind of got overmatched a little bit, but he also showed signs of life in that bat. And I think a full season under his belt, protected in the lineup by Goldschmidt and Arenado. He's not going to have to overperform. I really like him this year, and I think he's going to take off.
Yeah, I think also I'll stick with the Mets for my sleeper hitter here. And I think this is also a guy who kind of gets lost in the shuffle in that lineup because you see all the big names. You see Lindor, you see Alonso, you see Dom Smith. Brandon Nimmo as a fantasy player is an underrated asset because he's good in the OPS categories. You guys had those. He has the ability to do some steals. He'll get you some pop. He can hit 17 home runs. If he's healthy, that's the big issue with him because right now, he's had injuries, had a neck issue in 19. Last year he was healthy. He was a very effective offensive player. I think Brandon Nimmo is a good fantasy sleeper looking for a third outfielder.
That's an interesting choice. I feel like there is a little bit of Mets bias there. Just a tad bit.
Yeah, I just think also the opportunity for Brandon, he's hitting a lead off in a much better lineup than he was in last year.
Will he be platooning with Kevin Pillar or Albert Almora?
I mean, he would be on the strong side of the platoon, obviously, but as of right now, they're trying to get him more at bats in spring training against left-handed pitching because they really clearly think he can be a close to everyday guy.
Interesting. We shall see.
Yeah, we shall see. You have any other sleeper hitters that are interesting to you?
I do. And this is a guy who, if it's not 2021 that he fully takes off, it's somebody that you might be able to get cheap and keep. And I think he might actually have a really good 2021. And it's Nick Madrigal of the Chicago White Sox. It breaks my heart as a Tigers fan to even say this, but I love this player. I love Nick Madrigal. He's going to have a good average. He's going to be that balanced type I referenced earlier. So I'm going with the Chicago White Sox second baseman.
Yeah, I had Nick Madrigal on my team last year. He was a nice find when he was there. Now he got hurt, missed some time, but the high average guy, help you out in that batting average department, which it's a big deal because a lot of these sluggers are hitting like 240, 250. He's the guys who hitting over 300. That's help.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to have a ton of homers, but again, he'll contribute in every category.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's a good option there. Let's go to the pitchers here. Let's start with the starting pitcher. Any starting pitchers that you really like?
Yeah, one is, to a real baseball nut, he's a household name already. But to those people listening that may not follow every team, especially the West Coast teams, Jesus Luzardo of the Oakland A's is going to really come into his own in 2021. And I think if you can get him, you get him.
Yeah, interesting. And I know Luzardo, he had a small sample size, all the talent in the world, and Oakland has a reputation just making these pitchers be very, very good. So I love that pick.
Yeah, he had 2 bad starts, which really ballooned his numbers, but I think he's going to be a consistent arm. He may be, though, someone to watch on the limited innings, but I could also see him if they're in a playoff race and they're trying to conserve him, slide to the bullpen. And if you don't do, if you're in a good position with wins and quality starts, I think he's a great option to help out in the strikeouts per inning, the whip, the ERA. I just love him across the board.
Yeah, I have one in your division who I'm sure you saw a bit last year. Interesting. Brady Singer on the Royals. I liked him a lot. I saw him last year. He got they was not expecting him to be a factor for the pandemic. They bring up, he starts the second game of the season for the Royals. Held his own against some very tough hitters in those divisions. And I think year older, better lineup behind him, got a better chance of some wins. I think you could see, again, sort of same deal with Lazar, where the innings are a bit iffy there, but I like what he has there, and he showed some guts last year. I think Brady Singer could be a sneaky pick there in the middle of late rounds.
Yeah, believe it or not, when their draft came up, I know everyone was saying the Tigers will take Mize at 1. I kind of wanted Singer over Mize. I know Mize at the time was just like no one was going to touch him, but I love Brady Singer, so I'm very nervous to be facing him in the division for the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think so. And let's talk about I'll talk closers for a second here, because I feel like closer strategy is also very interesting, because I feel like this is one where, I don't know if you feel me, it's like I hate drafting closers high because 90% of the time they're either going to be bad, lose their jobs. At least a third of the league turns over every year in terms of closer jobs. I don't want to spend premium picks on closers.
Yeah, to me, closers are the most fantasy football-esque type player in fantasy baseball, where like your third running back or your third wide receiver could be great one week and then they never get used again. And you're like, what's going on? They had one bad game and they're out. It's just such a crapshoot. Closers, I think you study the depth charts, right?
Yep.
You just got to get who you can get. And if the closers start coming off the board, you do not want to be last to grab a closer. So I say go with the flow on closers. And, if all of a sudden 4 division leading projected teams closers are off the board, I'd shoot for one of those, second tier team closers as soon as possible. At least get one on your squad.
Yeah, because saves are saves. I mean, somebody's got to save games to the Pirates this year. So
right. Yeah. And they will not be first, but I do think you should try and aim for a team who's going to win at least 75 games closer before they're all gone.
Yeah. In other words, you don't want to get stuck with the Rockies closer.
No one to get stuck with the Rockies closer. All due respect to whoever that will be this year.
Yeah, I feel like for me, I also put value this year, especially on like the relievers that have high strikeout totals. I feel like those guys are going to be extremely valuable this year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have a second sleeper pitcher that is not necessarily your biggest K per 9 guy, but he will fill out the rest of the statistics. And that's Zach Gallen of the Diamondbacks. Another guy who to baseball fanatics is a household name. But to those of you who don't know, this guy is solid. He's reliable, dependable. He is a stud out in Arizona.
Yeah, I was so happy the Marlins traded him out of the division, because that was a trade I did not understand there. Right? I know Jazz Chisholm's a highly rated prospect, but like pitching is so hard to find. I know they have some other guys in that organization. They have Pablo Lopez, who was good. Sixto Sanchez had a big rookie year. Alcantara has been good, but like Zach Gallen might be as good as any of them.
Yeah, I think Zach Gallen is arguably one of the top 3 pitchers in the NL West right now. So that's high praise, I know, but I love him. I think he's a great, great pitcher. And if you can steal him in the 3rd or 4th round, people aren't paying attention. That would be just unbelievable.
I also am going to throw my hat in the ring on a Yankee guy for a sleeper pitcher. I think Jameson Taillon landing in the Bronx is the perfect spot for him.
I got to see him stay healthy. I hope he does, because I really enjoy his work. I love watching him pitch. I'm rooting for him to do well this year. I just got to see it first.
Because of their high-risk pitchers, I like him a lot more than like Corey Kluber for them.
For sure. And I would not touch Tyon before the 8th or so round.
Yeah, like I said, you can get him late, I feel like. Probably get him like in double digits.
Yeah, 8th might still be too early. I think there is a lot of upside, but it's got to be proven. I love the guy, though.
Yeah, let's go the other. Let's go to the bus. Let's go to people you should avoid, because I feel like a lot of this is always brand name, off a like slightly down year. You're hoping for the rebound that doesn't have. I feel like that's a good recipe for your busts.
Yeah, and one of these busts I'm hoping to reverse jinx. I have him on my team. This is year 3, I think, where I'm like, all right, this is it. Let's do it. It's time. Vlad Guerrero Jr. I'm so nervous that he's going to continue to be a bust. I don't love his peripherals. He swings wildly like his father shockingly enough, without the discipline of his father right now. He just seems a little overmatched at the big league level. So I'm hoping to reverse jinx this because he's going to be on my squad this year, but I'm nervous that Vlad Guerrero Jr. is going to be a bust.
Yeah, he's also on my squad. He's on my 3 keepers of the year. So I'm hoping that he picks it up.
And I'm sure he was a guy you thought, I'm definitely going to keep him, but not without reservation, because that's how he was for me. Like, I was like, oh, I can't get rid of him, but I'm really hoping, because to me, on my fantasy team, this is his make or break year.
Yeah, I think that's the case for me too. Because like I have also, because like our league, the way it works, we have like 3 big league guys and 1 minor league guy. And the minor league guy I have is Jared Kelnick, who is going to be a stud. So you figure at the service time controversy in Seattle, might be up on the roster on opening day. So at the end of the year, up to decide possibly Kelnick or Vlad Jr. So that's going to be a choice I probably have to make.
Right now, I'd go Kelnick.
Yeah, that's probably where I'm leaning to. In terms of a bust hitter candidate, I'm going to I got 2 in the city of Chicago for you.
Okay.
Number 1, Jose Abreu is not doing what he did again last year with the MVP. He won the MVP in the American League. I feel like if you're paying for MVP Abreu, you're going to be very disappointed, because he does the same thing every single year. He gives you about 25 home runs, about 90 RBIs, averaging 270s. If you are hoping that last year's projected is going to be, okay, this is what we got going on here, that's a big problem for you. I do not touch Jose Abreu.
I can see what you're saying. It's almost like saying, the best movie ever's sequel will not be as good as the original. It's tough to compare. The guy was really good last year, but over 162 games, I agree with you. It's not going to be the same output. That lineup is stacked. I just, I think he's going to lose some RBIs and homers and stuff to other people in that lineup. I would say to avoid him in the first couple rounds for sure. I can see your point for sure.
So I feel like somebody's got to bite the bullet, take him like about 3 rounds earlier than he should be taken.
I could see that happening in almost 90% of leagues across the country, especially those Chicago leagues.
Yeah. Yeah. The other one I'll stay with Chicago, Chris Bryant, bust candidate for me again, because this is one of those where you can say, oh, walk year. He was hurt last year, but he has not been the same guy since about 2017. He's had wrist injuries. He's had back injuries. He's had injuries all over the board. They talked about them trying to trade him, so might be distracted on the field. Like, I would be very wary of Chris Bryant. I feel like name value there as they get him picked a couple rounds higher than his production warrants.
I had him on my short list of bust candidates, and the only reason I didn't throw him on was because in a lot of projections I've seen, they don't have him doing anything extraordinary this year. He's got kind of a pedestrian projection. So I kept him off the list because I think that, he's figured out at this point. I think he's still a household name, but he is certainly not in that top tier of third baseman anymore.
No, my prediction with him, I feel like he's going to be shipped out at the trade deadline by the Cubs. Like, I don't think they're going to be in contention the whole year.
No, the Cubs are not. I don't think the Cubs are going to have a great year for sure.
No, I think for sure. Like, that's one I could also see. Like, I know the Mets have been linked to. I could see them sort of circling back in July if their third base situation is not doing very great.
Yeah, and that, you know what? That'd be a nice pickup for the Mets if he's having a good to great season. Good season, sure. You put him in the 6 hole as the Mets, and yeah, we're fantasy projecting in other ways here. Yeah. My second bust is a guy who had a monster 2019, fell off the face of the earth last year, and we don't know how he's going to rebound from a shock injury, although they're saying he's fine. I'm going Cody Bellinger. There's just no way he's ever going to put up those 2019 numbers. I don't love his swing a lot of the time, and I just think he can figure out it's not going to be great for Mr. Bellinger. I think he can be relieved a little bit by the Dodgers being so great overall. If he was on a small market team and the whole lineup was relying on him, I don't think it'd be pretty. So he'll have a nice year, but I don't think he's going to be that mega star this year that he was in 2019.
Yeah, I think that's a very good one. Do you mind if I start bust pitchers? I have one I'm very confident is going to be drafted way too high.
Go for it.
Trevor Bauer.
Yes. Oh, gosh. And you know what? I'm not a Met fan. I love the Mets. But after that whole saga, is it mean to say that I hope he busts? Is it too mean to say that? I just think he's just so everything he does is just like misses. It just misses the mark.
I'm not even off the field stuff. When you can, that's also gonna be a problem because now he's in Los Angeles. We're in a bigger microscope now, where he was in Cincinnati or Cleveland, where no one was really caring what he was doing on social media. But he also, if you look at his career track record, last year he got paid off 11 brilliant starts against very bad lineups. He's had one very good season before that in 2018. The rest of the time, he's guys at pitchers an ERA over 4. And right now you talk about him as the starting pitcher 4 on most draft boards, which is absurdly high when you have a lot of quality pitchers on the board. I feel like if you're paying second round price on Trevor Bauer, you're gonna be very disappointed.
It's a classic case of recent bias. Like, that's all there is to it. I've never really loved Trevor Bauer on or off the field. You know, I think with the Dodgers, he will be better off than if he were on another team. But I can see the bust. If you're looking for him to anchor your staff and be your big numbers guy on your rotation, you're going to be sorely disappointed.
Yeah, because I feel like with Trevor Bauer, I feel like his ERA is going to be about like probably 3.5 around there. He'll win about 17 games. He's being supported by a great lineup, but he'll have some stuff off the field. He's going to be distracted. He's going to have a couple of stink bombs in there, and then you're going to be sitting there like, why did I pay second round price for Trevor Bauer? I could have had like a stud slugger.
Yeah, I mean, if Clayton Kershaw gets ripped apart by their media at times, who's to say what's going to happen to Bauer?
Yeah, and Bauer is from there, and you figure he would have an idea what's going on there. He's already getting into fights about like posts he's making. It's not good.
No, he is. You know, I'm not a fan, and I have no problem saying that.
All right, so who is your bust pitcher?
I'm going with somebody who is a former Tiger, but I think this is finally starting, you know, age and injuries are finally starting to creep up, and people are still going to think, you know, he's that guy. And I think in some ways he will be, but I don't know if he's going to be on the field all season. Mad Max Scherzer.
Yeah, you saw it with the Nationals last year. He was sort of falling apart a little bit. He was not the same guy. Age is catching up to him.
Yeah, and back and neck problems, you never like to hear that. And I like Max, so it's going to be tough to see, but I think he might finally be heading towards that breakdown.
Yeah, I think for sure. I think he's definitely a breakdown candidate. And I worry about like some of those older guys, especially like with the injuries, with the jumping innings. Like some of those guys are going to get hurt on you.
Yeah, I think the Nationals are in for a rough season overall. Just, you know, forecasting as much as I can. I don't love that team, and I think they're reliant on, you know, Juan Soto to just be way over his head, you know, better than he can be right now. It's not going to be great. You know, if I'm a Met fan, I'm worried about the Braves, and that's it.
Yeah, the Mets and Braves are at the division right now. That's basically where we are. I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about the Phillies. And the Marlins, I think we're a short season, 7-inning doubleheader boosted playoff team. I don't think they're doing it over 162.
No, and you know what? It makes me feel like it's the late 90s again. Mets and Braves, you know, going at each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm trying to think of in terms of like, I know I want to get to a reliever like who I feel like could be a bust candidate. I'm trying to like think of my options here because the problem is like I'm not one who tends to value relievers super highly, but I'm like, I think for me, the guy who jumps out is Devin Williams on the Brewers because people are going to buy that very ridiculously low ERA for a very short season. They're going to be disappointed if he's like pitched to a 2 ERA. So they have like a 0.5.
Yeah, and he's not going to get the saves, so it's kind of a tough spot. You know, he's a very talented pitcher, but for fantasy wise, I tend to stay away unless you're later in the season. You can get him. You need a little bump in
ratio.
ERA. Yeah, that'd be where I'd go for him.
Yeah. All right, and that's what we got for fantasy baseball, Alan. Thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Good luck.
Good luck. Before I let you go, I'll be following social media. Keep on some of the stuff you're up to.
Sure. On Instagram at Allen Austin Sports and on Twitter at Allen_Austin_. And you can follow our podcast. My co-host Ben Rosen and myself do the American Scene podcast, which is we watch movies with American in the title and kind of go over their, cultural value, significance, and what the messages they're trying to say about our beloved country. So American Scene Pod, on Instagram, find us on Twitter, and we have a blast doing it. So thank you for allowing me the time today to come on, Mike.